as the murder rate increases to 62 this weekend, we cannot afford to engage in public relations gimmickry. The elections are over. Both the government and the official opposition have taken an oath to work for the peace, order, and good government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The national crisis around the rising rate of violent criminal acts require that we work with the government to develop a bipartisan national strategy to solve crime. Since the government, from its election in May of 2007, has failed to present to this country a national strategy to deal with the issue of the rising crime rate, the fear, the paranoia that we all must live with every day, we have decided not only to criticize, but to engage in a constructive process and to recommend to the government, since they have not come to the country with a constructive strategy, we take this opportunity today to provide to the Bahamian public what should be done. First, any amendment of the Juries Act ought to include the careful recommendations which were made by the Honorable Chief Justice of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And let me remind the government what those recommendations are with respect to the Juries Act. The Chief Justice in 2003 recommended that if any amendment were to be made to the Juries Act, they should include the following. 1, to restrict the number of persons exempt from jury service. 2, to lessen the liability of persons to serve and to reduce the incidence of too frequent service by A, limiting the length of service to 6 weeks, and B, excusing persons from service for 5 years thereafter. 3, to impose penalties on employers who prevent employees from serving on juries, whether by threats of loss of pay or otherwise. 4, to require the registrar to produce to employers, when they so request, a return of the time any employee has served on a jury. And 5, to permit the registrar to pay jurors' fees to an employer in respect of service on a jury by employees. I call upon the government today that if any amendment were to be proposed to the Juries Act, that they include these recommendations which were made by the people who must apply the Juries Act every day, and that is the judges, the stakeholders in our criminal justice system. Going beyond public relations gimmickry, we need a plan from the government for the establishment of a judicial complex. Presently, the Supreme Court operates out of 4 separate locations, requiring the movement of files from one building to the other. This situation makes it difficult for judges to confer, exposes documents to loss, and undermines the security of judicial officers and documents. A proper judicial complex would better serve the security of judges and court personnel, the sequestration of jurors, the separation of prosecution witnesses from the family and friends of accused persons, and accommodate the centralized storage of registry files. The Christie administration started to address this problem, and you would recall in the year 2000, late 2005, the Christie administration issued a contract of $5.3 million to Edward Penn Construction Company to build a 12-courtroom complex on Nassau Street. In addition, the Christie administration agreed a plan for the construction of a judicial complex to accommodate the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal. All that was left to do was to select a suitable location for the building of this court. I am calling upon the government today to get on with it and identify the location and commence the construction of the judicial complex to accommodate the Supreme Court and Court of Appeal. Thirdly, remuneration of judges and court personnel. We call upon the government to improve the remuneration of judges so that what the judges receive would be competitive with the private sector in order to attract more senior lawyers to the bench. And it is instructive to know, and the press, I want you to research this, because before the PLP administration came to power, the FNM administration had appointed a judicial commission. The commission studied the problem and made recommendations to the government. Hubert Ingram, who was Prime Minister at the time, took it upon himself. They recommended that the salary of the judges should have been increased by over 40%. He took it upon himself and exercised what he likes to do, and that is a prime ministerial fiat. And he reduced the recommendation from 42% to 24%. And that is the reason today why it is so difficult to attract senior lawyers to the bench in the Bahamas. We ask the government to look at the two commissions which were appointed by the Christie administration and the recommendations they made. One commission appointed in 2004 under the chairpersonship of Mr. Sean McQueenie, and the second under the chairpersonship appointed in 2006 of Mr. Justice Joseph Struan, and to implement the recommendations of these commissions to improve the terms and conditions of judges and court personnel. Fourthly, to increase judicial independence of our judiciary by providing budget autonomy to the judiciary, including the capital works of its buildings and facilities, as well as court personnel free from establishment and financial clearances from the ministries of the Public Service and Finance respectively, and to give the Chief Justice the direct control and autonomy over the facilities of the court. Many courtrooms sometimes are out of operation for considerable periods because they must wait on the Ministry of Works. Sometimes without key court personnel because they have to wait on the Ministry of the Public Service. Fifthly, unrepresented defendants appear before the courts daily facing serious criminal offenses. Because they are unrepresented, judges have to take more time to ensure that their rights are secured and that they understand the judicial process and procedures. Justice in our country, ladies and gentlemen, should be available not only to the rich, but also the poor. That's right.